killer robots. So killer robots actually are real. And there are companies making killer robots, and so you need to know about killer robots. The characteristics of killer robots, there's two main characteristics, of course. Firstly, killer robots can kill. Secondly, killer robots are robots. But there's another key characteristic, is that killer robots are controlled by humans, because there's a line. At this point. So this is a YouTube screenshot of Boston Dynamics. It's a company that makes killer... I won't play you the video. But this is you can find it. It's on YouTube. It's uploaded in October 2003. It's this fabulous video of a killer robot. And basically, it just spends 8 minutes running around the car park of this company in America that have designed this killer robot. And occasionally, it sort of runs past a kind of a fat, balding bloke who's holding a controller. And he's running around, he's running this killer robot around. And but you see, at the end of the day, that's the point. The point is, it's not just the killer robot, it's the bloke with the controller. He's controlling the killer robot. So, the robot running around the car park has been controlled by a human, and the question is, could a computer control that killer robot instead? You see, could a computer, computers disruptive technology, computers like to relieve humans of their jobs, so could a computer control a killer robot? Okay, and in fact, we could go a step further. Could we write an app that people could download on their phone? And now I know how long I have. Could we download an app on our phone, which when you type in someone's name into the app, then some killer robots are unleashed and goes and kills that person? So could there be a killer robot app? Can computers do that? So that's kind of an interesting question. So what would a company need in order to make that killer robot app? So firstly, they'd need a good database, right? Because the idea is you type someone's name in, and it's got to find them. So you need names, addresses, and accurate information about the daily routines of billions of people. So secondly, we need some people that can write the app. So we need employees that are very good at writing computer programs. Thirdly, we need very good facial recognition software to make sure that the killer robot kills the right person. Fourthly, we're going to need experience in kind of control. This is somehow one of the hardest parts. We need to control the killer robots, like out of this car park and towards the correct person. And then fifthly, of course, we need an army of killer robots. So if we have all of those things, then we can write a killer robot app. So what's the company that has all of those things? How about Google? So let's have a look, right? Does Google have names, addresses, locations of billions of people? Absolutely, right? Even if you don't have an Android phone, even if you don't have a smartphone at all, somebody you know, your boss, your work colleague, your wife, your granddaughter, somebody has typed your name and your phone number and your address into their Android contacts, and they've synced that contact list with Google, and Google knows what your name is, what your address is, and where you live, and your phone number too. So does Google have employees that can write good computer programs? Of course it does. Does Google have facial recognition software? Of course it does. I had an Android tablet once, and I just looked at it, and it would unlock. It was a very kind of cool thing. Does it have computer programs that can drive machines around? Of course it does, because it's currently spending a lot of money on self-driving cars. So the only question left is, does Google have an army of killer robots? And the answer is, well, you see, Google has a motto, which is, don't be evil. Which it quietly dropped in 2015. And possibly unrelated to that, in December 2013, Google bought Boston Dynamics and 7 other robot companies. And now suddenly Google own all these scary killer robots. Exactly. So how many killer robots have Google actually got? Probably enough to make it feasible to write that app. So actually, I think in theory, I've attempted to construct a proof that in theory, somebody at Google could write an app which really would have the property that you download it, you type someone's name in, and it unleashes several, you'd probably have to do some experiments to work out how many was enough, but enough killer robots to finish this person off. So that's something computers can do. I think at this point in time, all the ingredients are there. Okay, so this talk is about what computers can't do, but this, I think, puts it into some kind of perspective. So So here's another question. What about if a computer at Google was sentient and realized that it could, maybe we wouldn't need a human to write the app. Maybe the computer could write the app. Maybe sort of very 2001. Maybe the computer could write the app, and maybe the computer could just decide to take over the world because it's got access to the facial recognition software and the database. Maybe the computer could just kind of go rogue and take over the world anyway. So maybe computers would find that appealing, but I'm not so sure, because for a computer to make that leap and decide that it's going to kill everyone in the world, the computers would have to be able to think. And I don't know if computers can think. So we've seen something computers can do. If somebody wrote the program, they'd kill everyone. But we've also seen maybe they can't think, okay? And in my personal opinion, I don't think computers can think. So here's a picture of two things. The thing on the left is Garry Kasparov. He was the world chess champion in 1997, which is when this photo was taken. And the thing on the right is what at the time was a very fancy-looking monitor. And that monitor was attached to a computer, and the computer was called Deepblue, and it was made by IBM, and it was the best chess-playing computer of that time. So world chess champion versus computer chess champion. This was a 6-game match played in 1997, and it was big news. Kasparov lost. And 1997 marked the era when computers became better at chess than humans, and since then all that's happened is computers have got much, much, much better, and now there aren't any more competitions between humans and computers, because no human with any sense would ever dream of trying to play a computer at chess anymore. So who's thinking in this picture? Well, Garry Kasparov certainly looks as if he's thinking. I think that's a Sicilian defense. We're a few moves in, and he's probably trying to work out what the best move to play is. And he's using his intuition, he's using insight, he's using experience, he's also using psychology. Even though he's playing a computer, he's somehow played this computer before, he knows what kind of positions that computer plays well and what kind of positions that computer plays badly, and he's adapting his play to try and beat that computer. What's the thing on the right doing? Is the thing on the right thinking? I'm not so sure that thing is thinking. Is Deepblue thinking? I don't know. What does a computer do? A computer is a device that's very, very good at following instructions very, very quickly, right? And that's different to thinking, in my opinion, right? So the basic logical instructions that a computer follows contain something called a computer program. And I'm going to have to tell you something about computers and computer programs in this talk, but I'm going to try and keep it simple whilst also attempting to get to the difficult point. So let me tell you two things about a computer. First thing is the computer has memory. A computer needs to store information because sometimes it does calculations and then remember the answer and look back at the answer later. So a computer needs memory, right? Where the computer stores information, the computer program is typically stored in the memory as well. And a computer also needs a processor. The processor is basically the bit of the computer that reads all the instructions in the program and does them one by one, very, very quickly. And sometimes the instructions say, go and do this instruction instead, jump over here. You know, the processor works very, very fast following these instructions. Okay, so nowadays, processors can process a 4 gigahertz processor. You probably have one of those in your phone now. That's doing 4 billion, that's following 4 billion instructions per second. And so you can see even in 1997, because IBM had a lot of interest in computers and were doing a lot of research into making computers very fast, that computer Deepblue, it was analyzing 200 million chess positions every second, right? So what was it doing? It was just trying all the moves. Even the moves that were ridiculous. It would try moves of the form, that piece I moved last time, let's just put it back. That's the kind of move it would try. It would try every single move, and it would try all the responses and keep going very, very fast, and then it would make some kind of guess as to which positions looked okay, and then maybe follow up with them. But Kasparov wasn't playing like that at all. There were many moves in a given chess position that Kasparov would not even consider, because he could see, he had intuition, he knew they were going backwards, but intuition ultimately gets defeated by brute force search, analyzing millions and millions of chess positions per second. Eventually, we've now proved that computers can do this better than humans. So I don't think that's thinking. So I think we're kind of safe from computers going rogue and trying to kill us all. But you see, the reason I don't think it's thinking is because I do a lot of unloading the dishwasher. And unloading the dishwasher is a very mechanical procedure. There's the plates, and I know where the plates go. And there's the bowls, I know where the bowls go. There's the cutlery, and I know where the cutlery goes. And I just sit just unthinkingly, I sit and put everything away. And I even unload the dishwasher in exactly the same order every time, because I'm trying to be like a computer in some sense. And while I'm doing that, I'm thinking, right? And I'm certainly not thinking about what I'm doing. What I'm doing is somehow subconsciously happening in the background. What I'm doing, I tend to be thinking about mathematics or whether I'm hungry or what I'm going to do after I've finished unloading the dishwasher. You see, and that's thinking. And whereas the computer, when we have robots that unload dishwashers, they'll just unload the dishwasher and they'll be gone. Right. So I need to talk about certain puzzles. We need to talk about problems and whether or not we can do them or not, okay? So I want to talk about problems, but the only problems I've mentioned so far have been very difficult problems. I've talked about the problems of, writing an app, that will somehow unleash killer robots. That's actually a very difficult problem for an engineer because there's lots and lots of components that need to go in it. And in somehow beating the world chess champion at chess is also very difficult. And what does it mean for a computer? Even trying to work out what the question is, do computers think? That's very, very hard. And different people have different opinions. So we need to talk about some simpler problems if you actually want to get anywhere. And what I'm going to do first, because I don't know how many of you are very happy with the abstract notion of a computer, I want to forget about computers as well, and I just want to talk about the idea of what a problem is and how to solve it, and how to know we've solved it, and also, if we get a problem we're stuck on, then wondering whether that problem can be solved. I want to consider these ideas. And the reason I'm giving this talk really is because I gave a big course this term, and I thought a lot about proving things and how to prove things, and somehow one thing led to another, and I got very interested in this topic. So here's a problem raised by the ancient Greeks. Can I bisect an angle using ruler and compasses? So this is an ancient, 2,000-year-old problem. The ancient Greeks, we have Euclid. We were very good at this kind of thing. The ancient Greeks, they were very interested in this kind of question. So if I could have the visualizer on, I will now demonstrate what an angle is and how to bisect it using ruler and compasses. Bought this on the Holloway Road today, just the same as the one I had when I was in the sixth form. And lo and behold, pair of compasses, fabulous, and a ruler. And I've also pinched one of my daughter's felt tip pens. So, it is yours, I'm sorry. Here we go. So first of all, I need to draw an angle. So, there's an angle. That looks all right. Is that okay? I think that's okay. I don't need to fiddle. Can you see the angle? I think it's okay. There's a shadow. Maybe I shouldn't worry. And here's here's the angle, and what the job is, what's the question? The question is, can we bisect the angle? And bisect, as maybe many of you remember, bisect means I need to draw a line sort of just around down there, kind of exactly in the middle of this angle, as it were. I need to cut this angle into two equal pieces, right? That's the kind of thing that the ancient Greeks were doing. Like these people like Euclid wrote an entire book on it, right? So, can we bisect this angle? You see, and the point is you can't kind of go, well, it's kind of, it's sort of about, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to guess. You've got to do it exactly. But we don't just have a ruler. We've got some compasses. Can we see them? There we go. So watch this. Here's how you do it. First of all, you put the point of the compass dead on that angle, and then, of course, we draw a circle. There you go. Or I'm only going to draw that bit of that circle. And now, the thing about circles is that the distance from the center of the circle to the edge of the circle, the circumference of the circle, is always the same wherever you try on the circumference. So two things I know for sure, well, one thing I know for sure is that line there, that red line there, is exactly the same length as that line there. Because I even tell you what the length is. The length is this length here. The length is the distance between the pencil tip and the spiky bit. So those two lines are definitely the same length, okay? And now I'm going to do something else. I'm going to put the spiky bit here. It's probably got a name, but they don't even have these. I went to the stationery cupboard at Imperial and said, could I have a pair of compasses? They looked at me like I was an idiot. Apparently things have moved on. I don't know. So there, while I'm chatting about, I'm doing a slide. You didn't even see what I was doing. I put the point thing there, and I drew a little arc, and put the pointy thing there, and I drew a little arc. And those two arcs have met at that point there, and I'm going to draw these two lines now. And again, in both cases, that is a line that went from where the pointy bit was to where the pencil bit was. So I've drawn 4 lines now, and all those lines are the same length. So great, 4-sided shape, all lines are the same length. What's it going to be? It's going to be a square, except it's not a square because it's a bit squashed. It's called a rhombus, okay? And now we open our copy of Euclid's Elements, the 300 BC, and we find the proposition that says, you've got a rhombus like this, and you draw the diagonal of the rhombus. Let's do it in pencil, because it's not the same. All the red lines are the same length. Here we go. Let's do that in pencil. There's the diagonal of the rhombus, and you can see the rhombus is very, very symmetric, right? And so this is a line of symmetry of the rhombus, and everything's all the same. This angle, and this angle are going to be the same, right? Because of, it looks quite, yeah, I just was looking at that one. It looked terrible. It does look quite good up there. So there we go. So we've drawn this line, and it's cut the angle into 2. It is clever. It's been known for 2,300 years. And in a book that was apparently the thing to read, even up to the 19th century. If you were an educated person, then you'd read Euclid. Right, I bisected the angle, and I need to. Can I have the PDF slides? Oh, here we are. So I bisected that angle. So here's a question. Here's a theorem. Here's a theorem, a mathematical theorem. It's possible to bisect an angle using ruler and compasses. Okay, and the proof of the theorem is you just watch me do it, right? And I talked your way through it, and I convinced you that I was doing it. And of course, Euclid does more than that. He labels the things A and B and C, and does sort of mathsy things that you maybe did at school, and ends up proving that you can bisect an angle using ruler and compasses. So it can be done. And do you know? Not only that, the reason it can be done is because I did it. Okay, so in fact, Euclid did it 2,300 years ago. And now here's another problem raised by the ancient Greeks. Can you trisect an angle using ruler and compasses? So bisect means cut it into 2 equal bits. Trisect means cut it into 3 equal bits. So can you trisect an angle using ruler and compasses? You kind of think once you've got bisecting, you kind of think you're on a roll. You tried trisecting, and the ancient Greeks couldn't do it. Okay? They found it very difficult to trisect angles using ruler and compasses. So that problem sat around unsolved with nobody doing it, and somehow, if you can't do it, then what other alternative is there? And 2,000 years later, in 1837, a chap called Pierre Vansel proved it was impossible to do. So that's why the Greeks couldn't do it, because it was impossible to do it. And I mean, bisecting the angle is kind of cool, but this is super interesting, because proving that it's impossible to do something, the questions look formally very similar. Bisect an angle, trisect an angle, but we solved one of them by doing it, and then 2,000 years later, we solved the other one by proving it can't be done. We resolved the question. It cannot be done. And that's why the Greeks failed. But the Greeks didn't want to conclude it couldn't be done. They just wanted to conclude they couldn't do it. So however does one prove it's impossible to do something? It's somehow, I don't know. That result seems striking to me. So what did Vansel have that the ancient Greeks didn't have? The ancient Greeks, they had geometry, and they were beginning to develop some arithmetic, and these were somehow the 2 fields of mathematics. They were completely disjoint in some sense. They didn't have much abstract mathematical machinery available to them. By the early 1800s, when Vansel was around, mathematicians had worked out what 0 was. Remember, for the Greeks, every number was positive. They'd invented 0, negative numbers. They'd Cartesian coordinates. This was the big insight. René Descartes observed that if you have a point on the plane, you could think of that point as having an x-coordinate and a y-coordinate. So suddenly that point, which hitherto had been a geometric notion, that point is suddenly has an arithmetic interpretation. We can explain where that point is using numbers. And this is a link between geometry and arithmetic that the Greeks didn't have. So, it took René Descartes. But nowadays, everyone, it's kind of a trivial thing. You draw graphs, and this is y, and this is x, and you're just taught it. But someone had to discover this, and it turned out it was a genius that discovered it. And also, these people got, because they were also quite good at arithmetic, they'd long since isolated these 4 basic plus, minus, times, and divide. But now, instead of thinking about all the numbers, they were interested in kind of subsets of numbers, that maybe things like the rational numbers. You can do addition, subtraction, multiplication, division on them. And now this is somehow when things begin to get interesting, they developed an abstract theory of dimension. So they consider these fields of numbers, they consider a collection of numbers, call it a field of numbers, then they consider a bigger collection of numbers, they call it a bigger field of numbers, and they realize that there was a notion of dimension. The bigger thing had a dimension over the smaller thing. And if you make the smaller thing really small, you can make the dimension get very big. So this is not kind of a real-world dimension. This is an abstract mathematical notion of degrees of freedom. And using these abstract collections of fields of numbers, they could construct objects that had some abstract, very large dimension. Okay? So it took 2,000 years to develop these concepts. And once they were developed, Vansel could take them, and he realized that it was impossible to trisect not just any angle, he proved it was impossible even to trisect a 60-degree angle using ruler and compasses. So basically, he looked at the systems. I don't want to bore you, really, but this is what I teach in my third-year Galois theory course. He looked at the systems of numbers generated by the coordinates of the... You see, he turns the geometric problem into an arithmetic one. He looks at the number systems generated by the coordinates of these points that you can only construct with a ruler and compass, and he proved that the dimension of all these fields was always a power of 2. And then he proved that the system of numbers you generate, if you can trisect a 60-degree angle, got dimension 3, and 3 is not in that list. The list goes 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, ... Never contains the number 3. So this was how the proof worked. So the conclusion so far is that Euclid proved it was possible to bisect an angle, and Vansel proved it was impossible to trisect an angle using ruler and compasses. And so we've learned from this that mathematicians can prove something's impossible by just doing it. And they can also prove that something's impossible, but actually it lies deeper, right? It often lies deeper. You know, and it might take thousands of years to develop the theory, okay? So we're going to see another example of this next. So Vansel's, and of course, as a remark, Vansel's proof used modern tools, modern things that were nowhere near known to the ancient Greeks. But the modern tools, as well as doing modern mathematics, they can solve ancient problems. This is, in some sense, vindication of the modern tools, the fact that they can resolve ancient problems. So this phenomenon is commonplace in mathematics. You get questions that are raised and sometimes take hundreds of years to answer, and the tools used in answering them are often not tools that were even in existence when the questions were stated. So there's mathematics. Now let's talk about computers. So there's the first ever computer programmer, Ada, Countess of Lovelace. So why is she the first ever computer programmer? Because she wrote the first ever computer program. So a guy called Charles Babbage, he was not really a mathematician, he was more an engineer, but he designed something called Babbage's analytical engine. And the idea, it was a machine, but actually it was a machine where you could set the dials and you could actually tell the machine to do lots of different things. It was a very primitive kind of computer. You set the dials, that's like writing a program, and then you run the machine, and the machine runs according to where the dials are set. So this is really the first computer that was around in some sense, this analytical engine. And Babbage gave lectures on it in Italy, somebody took notes in French, and these notes made it into the hands of Ada Lovelace, who decided she'd translate them to English. And while she was translating them, of course, you translate something, you read it. She read it, and she learned the material. And then she wrote a series of appendices at the end of Babbage's notes. And Appendix G, the last appendix, is an example of where you can set the dials in order to run a program that would compute Bernoulli numbers, which were at the time were a thing. And people would compute things by sitting down with pieces of paper and writing them all out. And her observation is Bernoulli numbers, kind of a bit annoying to compute. But if we had one of these analytical engines, then actually we could just set the dials like this, switch it on, and out come the Bernoulli numbers. It would, save somebody a job. So Ada Lovelace, she wrote the first computer program, and so we can ascribe to her a theorem: a computer can calculate Bernoulli numbers, right? And the proof is, do it. Just like the proof of bisecting the angle was doing it, the proof is, let's just write a computer program that computes Bernoulli numbers. So that's what she did. She never saw it run, because Babbage's analytical engine was never built. In fact, there were technical design problems at the beginning, and by the time these things were resolved, the money had run out. The funding dried up, and the analytical engine never got built, and Lovelace died at 36, and never saw her program run. But of course, nerds went away and, made other ones, so it does work. And it computes Bernoulli numbers. So you can see, if you're thinking, you see where the story's going, right? So now we skip forward 100 years to Alan Turing. And Alan Turing, he thought about computers as well, but he wasn't an engineer, he was a mathematician. And so he started thinking about mathematically modeling a computer, kind of like using arithmetic to study points in geometry. He started to wonder whether you could kind of model a computer using the language of mathematics. And nowadays, this thing is called a Turing machine. Okay. And Turing's mathematical description of a computer, it opened the doors for mathematicians now to start proving much more deeper and profound results about what computers could or couldn't do. And of course, we're in just the same situation, right? You've got a problem. The question is, can a computer do it? If the answer is yes, how do you show the answer is yes? You just write a computer program that does it. How do you show the answer is no? It's going to be difficult, right? So Lovelace isolated this interesting problem, computing Bernoulli numbers, and showed a computer could do it. And Turing also isolated an interesting abstract problem, but he showed, because he had more tools than Lovelace, he showed a computer could not solve this problem. And again, when you just step back, however are you going to prove something like that? How can you check that every single computer program that ever was written, will be written, can be written, will not solve this problem? I'm going to try and explain to you how he did it. And the problem, it wasn't just an abstract problem as well. It's not just this bisect the angle nonsense. This is kind of sad thing. Vansel proved you couldn't trisect the angle, but by this stage, nobody cared. Whereas Turing worked on a problem that actually, even though in 1936, when he worked on it, there were still no computers, right? The first computers started appearing in the 40s. And Turing actually was involved with several of them. But Turing proved this theorem in 1936 before a single computer had ever been built and a single computer program had ever been run. And he proved, and he was interested in the idea that computers might sometimes crash. And computers crashing is a pain, right? You lose data, you lose information, you have to switch it off and on again. We don't want computers crashing. Turing could see that this was going to be an issue before any computers ever even existed. So, I'm going to try and tell you a bit about what Turing did. So let me try and explain to you what a computer program looks like. So this is a computer program written in pseudocode. So it's kind of written in English, but there's lots and lots of steps. And what the processor will do is it will just go from each step to the next step unless somebody tells it to do something else. And at each step, it will carefully read what's there, and it will do what it's told. Okay? And it will do it very, very quickly. So this computer program here, step one is going to ask the user to type. So you run it, you click on, you have it on your phone, you click on the little app, and a little screen pops up, says type in a number. And then you type in a number like 53, and you click OK, and you've typed in 53, and the box disappears. And now step two is let x be that number. So now if we typed in 53, x will be 53. Now step three is a funny thing that involves the question, is x equal to 7? But we've typed in 53, so x isn't equal to 7. If x was equal to 7, we would have gone somewhere. So x isn't equal to 7, so we go to step 6. So we've typed in 53, x is 53, we're at step 3, x isn't 7. So let's go to step 6. Step 6, we print hello on the screen, and then we stop. So when you run this app on your phone, you click on the little app, it says type in a number, we type in 53, we click OK, another little box pops up saying hello, and then that's it. App's finished. So, and that's not, if you play with it for a bit, you'll realize that that's what it normally does. But then eventually, you hit on the idea of typing in the number 7, and so you type in number 7, the computer lets x be 7 in step 2. In step 3, it notices that x is equal to 7, and so instead of going to step 6, it goes to step 4. And in step 4, it has to look and see what to do, and step 4 says go to step 5, so it goes to step 5, and step 5 says go to step 4, and so it goes to step 4. And then step 4 says go to step 5, so it goes to step 5, and it just alternates between step 4 and 5. And this is what you can tell the computer's not thinking, because if a human had to do that, they'd get bored at some point, but the computer will just keep doing it. That's exactly what they're paid to do. They just quite happily, mindlessly follow the instructions. So the computer will get stuck going between steps 4 and steps 5. Now you're running this, if your operating system gets stuck in that kind of loop, then it stops. You see line 1 is kind of implicitly saying, what's the person pressing on the keyboard? But if you're just hopping between step 4 and step 5, the computer isn't looking at the keyboard or the mouse or anything like that, and you wiggle these things around and nothing happens, and you know what's happened, right? When your computer's in that state, you press the caps lock key and the light doesn't come on, you know that your computer's had it, and you have to switch it off and on again. So computer programs sometimes get stuck in loops, and you've all seen it happen. So there you go. If the user types in the number 7, that computer program gets stuck in this loop, so it crashes, right? So here's a much more complicated program, and we're not going to analyze it because we'd just basically spend all day analyzing it. All I'm showing, that other one had 7 steps, this one's got 9 steps, but it's vastly complicated. You ask the user to type in a number, let's say they type in the number 9. Step 2, let x be that number, Step 3, x is 9. If x is bigger than 10, it's not bigger than 10. 9 is less than 10. So we go to step 6. Step 6 says if it's less than 10, and it is less than 10 because 9 is less than 10, so we go to step 4. Step 4, x changes. Step 4, we replace x by 2 times x. So now suddenly x was 9, so now it's 18. And then what do we do? Then we go back to step 3. Now x is 18, and now x is bigger than 10, so we go to step 7. And you can see we're kind of jumping around, right? X is 18. Step 7 says if x is less than 100, go to step 4. Step 4, we've been to step 4 before. So you kind of think, oh, we're in an infinite loop. But we're not in an infinite loop, because when we were at step 4 before, x was 9. And now we're at step 4 again, but x is 18. And so we're not in exactly the same state as before. So we might not be in an infinite loop. And x is going to be replaced by 36. And you can kind of see it jumps around, right? And we didn't even go to, there's like some, step 5 is ridiculous. It's not really clear whether this is the question, can this computer program get stuck in an infinite loop? That is a tricky logic puzzle, right? And I don't fancy doing it. And somehow I would try and do it using intuition. I would kind of try to find key numbers which somehow behave differently to other numbers. But can this computer program get stuck in an infinite loop? Figuring out that kind of question is a complicated logic puzzle. Now, I like doing complicated logic puzzles, but actually, at the end of the day, what kind of gadget is really suited to solving complicated logic problems? It's a computer. So what we should really do is not bother solving that problem at all. We should... What does that mean? That doesn't mean I stop, right? I'm halfway. Oh, and that's good, because I'm halfway through the slides as well, because the last 2 slides are jokes. So this is the sort of puzzle which would be ideal for a computer to work on. And so this is what Turing decided to work on. Let's write a computer program that checks other computer programs to see if they get stuck in infinite loops, right? So when a computer program gets stuck in an infinite loop, it's crashed, and that's bad, right? So we'll say a computer program is bad if it can get stuck in an infinite loop, and we'll say a computer program is good if it never gets stuck in an infinite loop, right? So there's some definitions, and now Turing says, how do we check to see if a computer program is good, right? We want to tell the good programs from the bad programs. So he's going to write a computer program, right? So in his 1936 paper, he abstractly axiomatized mathematically what a computer was, and so now he could use mathematics to work on this question, and he found the solution, which, as I say, you probably guessed by now. So Turing's going to try and write a computer program, and the input to the computer program is not a number. And this isn't about, like, you've probably gone to some website. And I do this when I'm writing references. You click on something, it says, upload your reference, and you find the reference somewhere, and you just drag it over. It's not. Computer programs will quite happily accept random files as inputs rather than just numbers. So this computer program that Turing's going to write, it's going to write a computer program that takes as input an arbitrary computer program, a different computer program, and then Turing's computer program is going to print out good if it's a good one and bad if it's a bad one. Okay? So Turing's going to try and design that computer program. Okay? So, but actually, something interesting has kind of happened here, because if I've got a computer program that takes as input a computer program, that means that you kind of like take the computer program itself and kind of put the computer program into itself, which is a little bit meta. And that was where the fun started. So Turing realized if he could tell good from bad with a computer program, then he could write a ridiculous, useless computer program K, which would behave like a bad program if you inputted a good program, and would behave like a good program if you inputted a bad one. So the idea is you input the program, the computer program, crazy program K figures out if it's good or bad. If it's bad, that's great. If it's bad, it will just stop. And if it's good, it will intentionally go into an infinite loop and be bad. So program K is bad if the input's good, and program K is good if the input's bad, and then, of course, you take program K and you feed it into itself. Okay? And now what's the consequence? So now we could ask, is the answer going to be good or bad? If K is bad, then you feed it into K, and it's good, right? If K is bad, then K must be good. And if K is good, then K must be bad. So there's something wrong, right? Because the computer program can't be both good or bad. So we must have made a mistake, because we've got a contradiction. And the mistake is, of course, the 2-letter word that I underlined, that I put in red, right? The mistake is Turing's initial assumption that we could write a computer program which can tell good code from bad code. So that's Turing's mistake. I mean, it's not a mistake, it was an assumption. The assumption is the only part of the argument that he couldn't make completely logically valid, so his assumption is wrong. And Turing's conclusion is that it's impossible to write a computer program which can check any and every other computer program for bugs. You cannot, and this is why computer programs still crash, because it's impossible to check that they've got bugs. So Turing rigorously proved that in 1936, remark still before any computers had existed. Took him. I mean, I've sketched the idea, but what I want to stress is absolutely crucial to it all was the fact that he could he'd abstracted what a computer was and put it in mathematics. You see. So there we go. So there's a summary of this bit. Lovelace proved that a certain interesting problem can be solved using a computer program. The proof was just do it. Turing proved that a certain problem could not be solved using a computer program 100 years later, once the machinery got more sophisticated. So again, we see an example. Turing proved that it was impossible to do something. And in my mind, there's kind of it's an amazing thing to prove you can't do something. Okay? So it's formally just like trisecting angles, right? So this is what happens in life. This is what happens in mathematics. People work on areas of interest, and eventually they run into obstructions. They run into problems which they can't solve, and people work on them. And of course, sometimes they get solved later on, but sometimes they remain obstinate, and then eventually it turns out the reason they remain obstinate is because the answer is that your mathematical machinery cannot solve this problem. Right. So. So very brief summary. We can prove it's possible to do something by doing it. We can prove it's impossible to do something, but it often lies deeper. So we've seen an example in pure mathematics, and we've seen an example in theoretical computer science. Theoretical computer science with a capital T, really, because what do I mean? There's an issue with Turing's computers that I'll come to now. So what we're really interested in nowadays is because now computers do exist, and they're becoming vastly dominant in our lives, I'm going to talk about a practical problem involving computers. So let me first tell you, I told you that Turing axiomatized abstractly what a computer was, and here's some of the problems with Turing's theoretical notion of a computer. Firstly, had an infinite amount of memory, because mathematicians are kind of used to things being infinite. There's infinitely many numbers. So had an infinite amount of memory, and he didn't really care about processing speed. All he cared about was, did it get stuck in an infinite loop or not, right? So if you had a program that it turned out got stuck in a loop that would basically take 1 million years to get out of, but in 1 million years your mouse will magically start working again, and your computer didn't crash after all. You see, you don't really, if it's going to take 1 million years, you're not really interested, right? So in reality, computers have memory, and memory, this is an engineering question, memory is made out of stuff, right? Like terabyte hard drives are made out of tiny, tiny little magnets, and solid-state drives are made out of tiny little, electrical circuits. But any memory location that stores a piece of information is needs to be physically made if we're going to make one in our universe and stop looking at abstract computers like Turing. So we're going to need at least a particle, okay? At least, bare minimum, we're going to need a particle to make that thing. And unfortunately, there's only 10 to the power 80, but that's 1 with 80 zeros. There's only 1 with 80 zeros. There's only that number of particles in the entire universe. So that puts a limit on how much memory a computer can have. And similarly, quantum mechanics says that when you look very, very small, things get much weirder than you might expect. So one of the consequences of quantum mechanics, sort of currently believed theory, is that there's basically a smallest unit of distance which is meaningful to talk about. And beyond that, things just get too straight. And it's a very tiny distance, but beyond that distance, somehow everything becomes meaningless. Now, information, if you believe relativity, information can't travel faster than the speed of light. So one might ask how long the light would take to travel one of these Planck distances. It's all to do with Planck's constant and stuff. And it turns out that light would take 10 to the power minus 44. So that's 0 point and then 44 noughts, then a 1. No, it's not. It's 0 point, then 43 noughts, then a 1. There's 1 Planck time. 10 to the minus 44 seconds. So you cannot hope that your computer can do anything, because it's impossible to do anything in a unit of time shorter than 1 Planck time, where, of course, the Earth will become uninhabitable around 1 billion years. If we're interested in computers on Earth, then this is going to be an issue. And if more generally we'd be interested in kind of computers in the universe, then we have to kind of figure out when the heat death of the universe will be. But I read a lot about this on Wikipedia, and it's somehow that scientists aren't sure. They don't really know if the universe is going to expand forever. I mean, they believe in the Big Bang, but they don't know if there's going to be a big crash or if it's just going to stop. So I don't really know when the universe will end, but certainly the sun will burn out in a few billion years, and by 1 billion years, it'll be this red dwarf, and the seas will be boiling. And again, if you think about it, that puts some theoretical limit on the number of instructions that any computer can do. So let me just summarize. So to summarize, I'm not now interested in Turing's abstract theoretical computers. What about computers on this planet? They can't run a program which involves storing that much information, where that much is just some number I've chosen, very large, to make sure that it's more than the number of particles in the universe. And similarly, they can't run computer programs in which the processor has to do that many instructions, because again, I've just chosen this very, very large number to make sure that even if it did 10 to the power 44 instructions every second, it's still, the world is going to be a dead hulk by then. So these are limitations that Turing didn't have. Turing didn't really care. I mean, Turing had other things to think about. There was a war on, and but when these issues are now practical, right? It's not just can we solve the problem or not. It's can we solve the problem quickly? Okay. So these now give rise to new questions. And this is the last thing I'm going to talk about. In the remainder of the talk, I'm going to talk about a third question. So here's two they're not like these nightmare ones that I just showed you. Here's two very simple computer programs, because I need to teach you a concept. Computer program 1, the user types in a number, the user types in 53, and then step 2, let x be that number, so x is 53, and all it does, it doesn't print hello this one, it prints out x, okay? So sample run for program 1, the user types in number 53 and clicks OK, and the computer prints out 53. So it just prints out what you type, okay? So computer program 2 formally looks very similar. This time, the user types in a number, you let x be that number, but now instead of printing out x using our normal notation for printing numbers out, instead all it does is it prints out x things. Remember, 53 has a meaning, right? 53 means 53 things. So actually, instead of printing out our clever notation, it actually prints out the meaning of the number. So it prints out 53 things. So, well, if you don't like line 3, then how do you actually print out x zeros? What you would really do is you would just print out 1 0, and then you'll decrease x by 1. And if it was still positive, then you'll keep going back. So you'd actually do this using a loop. So that's how you print out x zeros using a computer program. So now, of course, sample run, let's type in 53 again, and this is the output. We just get 53 zeros. So now let's have a race, program 1 against program 2. We'll type in 53 to both of them, and who's going to win? Program 1's going to win, because program 2's got to do a lot more work, you see. First program's going to finish more. I mean, in practice, of course, both will finish in the blink of an eye, so you won't even be able to notice. But I want to explain a way of telling why this second program must be worse than the first program, why it works more slowly, and it's because of scaling. So by scaling, I mean, let's not type in 53. Let's now think about typing in a bigger number. Let's type a 5 and then a 3, and let's type another number. So instead of typing in 53, let's type in 531. Okay, and now let's run our two programs. We saw what happened when we typed in 53. Now let's type in 531, right? And the first program, it used to have to print out 53. Now it's got to print out 531. It just takes one more digit, right? Not very much more time at all. The second program is got to print out 531 things now, and 531 is about 10 times 53. So the second program is going to take 10 times as long to finish. So they behave in very different ways with a small perturbation of the input data. If I make the input data a little bit bigger, the first program deals with it easily. The second program, the amount of time it takes gets multiplied by a constant, so you have this compound interest phenomenon. It's like if you leave a penny in a bank long enough, eventually you'll get to £1 million sort of thing, because things can blow up sort of substantially. If you double your money every time, then by the time you've doubled your money 10 times, you've multiplied your money by over 1,000. So this is an issue that the second program has. It doesn't scale well. You make the input a little bit bigger, and suddenly it takes a lot longer to run. So when you're trying to solve real-world problems, the input data might well slowly increase, so you want to make sure that your computer program doesn't ground to a halt if the input data starts getting bigger and bigger. Okay, so an example is, it's a very complicated problem trying to work out when all the students in the college are going to take exams, because lots and lots of students register for lots and lots of different courses, so you have to make sure that every student, they haven't taken 2 courses for which the exams are at the same time, but all the exams are going to be crammed in to a small period of time, so you have to have some exams at the same time. It's a very delicate question. So right, if we wanted a computer program to solve, and of course we do have a computer program to solve this, and we want to make it scale like program 1, not like program 2. So scaling, I talked about it informally, but mathematicians have formalized these notions, okay? So the first time you do a historical search, the first time you see this notion of people really beginning to care about not just abstractly whether computers can do things, but how long it takes them to do them. It was in a letter, 1955 letter from John, this is the beautiful mind guy, 1955 letter from John Nash to the NSA, the American security agency, where he began to lay down these, he isolated the issue that actually it's not about whether the computer can solve it, it's about how quickly the computer can solve it. And he raised explicit problems in the area, some of which he can solve. So if you like, so I'll tell you what Nash said, because these are kind of important words, and it's just, so a computer runs in polynomial time if it scales like the first program. That's an informal definition. I'll give you a proper definition. Here's the proper definition. There. So formally, a computer program runs in polynomial time if there's a polynomial function like that, n to the power 20 plus 1,000, such that if you input a number with n digits, then the computer program will churn away and it will finish. But how long will it take to finish? The program will finish, but it will do at most p of n steps. Okay, that's the idea. If you can write a computer program like that, then you've got a polynomial that's kind of controlling how fast your computer will take to calculate. And polynomials don't grow too quickly. This is somehow morally the thought. But also, in practice, polynomial time computer programs are what people are after. If you've got a problem, you can solve it in polynomial time, then somebody has already written the code that will solve that problem for you, and it will run very efficiently. So we're interested now in the collection of problems which can be solved, we can be solved with a computer, and furthermore, the computer can solve it quickly. Problems that can be solved in polynomial time. And mathematicians, being what they are, they needed a name for this collection of problems, so they called it P, because that's what they do. So that's now called P, the collection of problems which we can solve in practice quickly. Okay. So now let me just mention codes a little bit. Secret codes are really good. You agree on a secret code with your friend, and then you've got the secret code, your friend's got the secret code, but nobody else has. And now you can send messages to your friend using the secret code, because you got your message and you encrypt it using the secret code. You send it to your friend, and they decrypt it using the secret code. You've both got the secret code, but no one else has got the secret code, so it works. So I'm afraid nowadays things aren't so easy, because I want my phone to kind of connect to random, I want my computer to talk to other. If I go to a website I've never been to before, my computer is suddenly talking to another computer that's never met before. And I might have to type in my credit card details if I want to buy something. And now I need to talk to this other computer. I need to send the computer a secret piece of information, but we haven't got a secret code. And how are we going to... You see, the problem is people can hear what you're doing on the internet. Your ISP knows what you're doing. The government probably knows what you're doing. And people that are just generally snooping around on the internet might see packets going by from your computer. So this is kind of a problem. It means secret codes aren't good enough anymore. We need something called public key cryptography, where the idea is I establish a code we're going to use, and even if somebody is snooping on my packets, even if my next door neighbor has got some kind of Wi-Fi detector thing, and they're watching all my Wi-Fi packets, I need to make sure that they can't find out what my credit card is. So these things are called public key codes, public key cryptography, and rather surprisingly, they exist. They were invented in the 70s when it was realized that these things were important. And the way they work is they exploit asymmetries in encoding and decoding algorithms. So the idea is you want to make sure that encoding is quick, but decoding is slow. So let me give you an example of an asymmetry. If you've got a piece of cotton, I'll give you a long piece of cotton, and I'll give you 2 minutes, and you can tie as many knots in as you like, and you can tie lots and lots of knots, and at the end of it, you can imagine you can make this piece of cotton into a real mess. Lots and lots of tiny little knots. You pull them tight, but after a while, the knots kind of get... You've ever done this? I've done this. The knots kind of get closer and closer together, and they kind of start compiling up on each other, and at the end, you get a nice kind of chunky little thing that's really difficult to untie. So you turn a piece of cotton into a big complicated knot. It's very easy. Give me a couple of minutes. I'll give you a complicated knot. On the other hand, you've got a big complicated knot. You've got to untie it. It's going to be very difficult. See, it's going to be possible, but it's going to take a lot more than 2 minutes. Okay? So some things in life are asymmetric, right? And surprisingly, something that you know a lot about, multiplication, turns out to be one of those things. So here's a multiplication problem. We don't have to do it. I'm going to tell you the answer, don't worry. What's 43 times 61? There's a method, right? You learned it at school, long multiplication. 43 times 61. There we go. We do 1 3, we do 1 4, 3 6s and 4 6s. And then we do some adding, and we've got the answer. And how many steps did we actually take? We did 1 times 3, 1 times 4, 3 times 6, 4 times 6. We did under 10 steps, okay? So long multiplication is actually a really good method for multiplying numbers together. That scales very well. Here's the clue that it scales very well. What are the numbers involved? The smallest number involved is 43. But did it take 43 steps? Right? Did we actually, remember that computer program that you typed in 43 would print out 43 zeros? That takes 43 steps. Here, we didn't use anywhere near 43 steps. We did it at under 10. So that's the clue, it scales very well. Okay? So now, let's unmultiply. So here's the answer, 2,183. I times two numbers together, and I got 2,183. And what were those two numbers? Now, they don't teach you how to do that at school. And so let's do trial and error. Was it 2 times something? We could divide 2,183 by 2. It doesn't work. We get remainder 1. So let's divide it by 3. It doesn't work. We get remainder 2. And so we just divide it by 4, or if you're smart, you'll skip 4 because you've done 2 and you'll go to 5. But you keep dividing and dividing and dividing, and eventually you divide it by 36. It doesn't work. You get remainder 23. You divide 2,183 by 37. It works on the nose. There's no remainder. It's 59. So we conclude 2,183 is 37 times 59. But when you think about it, so what are the numbers involved in this question? 2,183 and 37 and 59. And how many steps did it take? You see, this method is going to scale poorly because we basically took 37, I guess we took 36 steps because we didn't divide by 1. But this particular method for undoing multiplication scales very, very poorly, just like the second program, because the answer involved 37, but it took 37 steps. Whereas before, you're multiplying these things together, we do it in under 10 steps. You see? So there's an asymmetry. You can multiply them together in just a few steps, but unmultiplying them, factoring them, it's called, it took forever. Well, it took 37 steps. I mean, 37 isn't very long, really, but so before I go on to that point that I was about to make, every published method for unmultiplying numbers, in fact, scales poorly. Some of them scale less poorly than this one, but every published method scales poorly. We don't know how to do that. So factoring actually might be a problem that is not possible in polynomial time. And now let's scale. If instead of multiplying 2-digit numbers together, we started multiplying 100-digit numbers together, then we can multiply them together. We have to do this times this, this times this. We have to take a digit from the first number, a digit from the second number. That'll take like 100 times 100 is 10,000. So we do 10,000 multiplications. We do 10,000 additions. We do about 20,000 steps, right? That's not a problem. Do 20,000 steps in the blink of an eye. But remember, I'm talking about numbers with 100 digits here. Those numbers have a meaning, right? We write them down in this neat way, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. It's very clever, but they have a meaning, and the meaning is a vastly, vastly huge number of things that you can't even comprehend. And indeed, it's a number too big to fit in the universe. It's a number bigger than the number of particles in the universe. So that number is representing an idea that's too big for our universe, you see. If we just know the answer, the 200-digit number, which we get by tying them together, and we want to recover the factors, and we're going to use this method I explained, we might have to count all the way up to a 100-digit number, and we can't do that, right? Because the universe isn't big enough, we don't have enough time, and we don't have enough space, and it can't be done, at least within my lifetime. And when you're sending secret codes, you're not really worried about whether they're cracked after you're gone, right? So it's not just, that's my lifetime is somehow, this is now relevant data. But here's a funny thing about factoring. If somebody actually told you the answer, somebody said, do you know what, I think the answer might be this, and they just gave you two 100-digit numbers, you would be surprised that they've solved the problem, but you can check to see if they're right or not, because if you've got these 100-digit numbers, you can times them together and see if you get the 200-digit number you're supposed to get. So factoring has this sort of funny thing about it. It's hard to do, but if somebody tells you what the answer is, it's very easy to check. Because multiplying is easy. So factoring, it seems to be hard to do, but it's definitely easy to check. And the notion of a problem being easy to check turned out to be another central notion in modern computational complexity theory. So it got a name. NP is the collection of all problems for which we can check a solution is correct very quickly, by which I mean in polynomial time. Okay? So I've defined two classes of problems. P, the class of problems we can solve quickly, and NP, the class of problems that if somebody tells you what they think the answer is, you can check if they're right or wrong very quickly. So there's subtle differences, but different they are. So every problem in P is an NP, okay? all the problems that you can solve quickly, you can check the answer quickly, because if you've got your P problem that you can solve quickly, and somebody says, oh, I think I know the solution, and they give you the solution, you can check it by just solving the problem yourself. You solve the problem yourself, and you see if you get the same answer. So any problem in P is also in MP. Have I got a picture? Oh, no. But unfortunately, there's plenty of MP problems, problems where we can check the answers quickly, but which we don't know how to solve them quickly. So this raises a question. So here are some examples of MP problems we can check quickly, which are not known to be in P. So factoring large numbers, I've mentioned that already. We don't know how to do that quickly, but if someone tells you what the answer is, we can do it quickly. Timetabling exams, unfortunately, turns out to be another problem. And general problems of that nature, you know, I've had 3 kids going to secondary school, and the way it works is Islington Council sends you a form, and you fill in the form, and this is in like November or something. And you send in the form, and then the glorious news comes out where your kid's going to secondary school on the 1st of March. And why does that take 4 months? It's because trying to figure out a way of fitting every 11-year-old in the country into a school so that there's just the right number of students in each school is really, really hard. So there's examples all over science. These things, I don't know, I just took these things off Wikipedia. I've got no idea what any of those things mean, but they look very important, so I thought I'd mention them. So this one, I do know what it means. Decrypting data centers. We have a standard way of sending data to a secure website. When we're typing in credit card numbers to buy things on the internet, and decrypting that without the decryption key is something that we don't know how to do very quickly, but as I say, it's in NP. There's various other things. Candy Crush is an NP. Pokemon, also an NP. Super Mario Brothers, also an NP. Basically, trying to solve a Super Mario Brothers level is very hard, but if someone comes along and if somebody comes along and does it, you can clearly check that they've done it because they've got to the end. So we don't know a fast method for solving any of those problems, but we know a fast method for checking the answers. So there's examples of problems that are in P, but we don't know they're in NP, but we don't know if they're in P. Okay. So there's the question: does P equal NP? If we can check. If we have a problem, and it turns out we can check to see if the solution is correct quickly, could we actually have solved the problem quickly in the first place without knowing what the solution was? I'm doing all right. I thought I was going to overrun. I'm doing great. So there you go. By 1971, Stephen Cook had formalized this notion. And he raised this question explicitly in 1971, having laid down some mathematical background. So he'd given a rigorous mathematical notion of what a problem was, of what a solution was, and the class of problems that are in P and the class of problems that are in NP. There's lots of mathematics and rigor that I'm suppressing, but he did it, and he raised this question explicitly. And then the year after, he failed to get tenure at UC Berkeley. And because computers in 1971 were really irrelevant, right? So it's an abstract, well-defined mathematical question, and it was an unsolved problem that the mathematicians at UC Berkeley decided was of peripheral interest. But you've seen now the kind of implications that solving this problem might have. And it's now regarded as one of the most important problems in mathematics. It's one of the 7 Clay Millennium problems. So if you solve it, some entrepreneur has donated $1 million as motivation for trying to solve these problems. It turns out, so that's what it looks like. We've got the problems in P, they're in there. We've got the problems in NP, and then the question is there actually definitely a problem that's lurking where that question mark is, that's in NP, you can check the answer quickly, but it's definitely not in P, right? So we know plenty of problems that are in P, and we know plenty of problems that are in NP, and we don't know if they're in P or not, but that's the current state of our knowledge, okay? So what would happen if somebody proved that P equal NP? Because mathematicians theoretical computer science is working very hard on this problem. What would happen if somebody proved P equals NP? Then all of a sudden, a whole bunch of problems which we didn't know how to solve, suddenly we could solve very, very quickly using a computer, right? So suddenly transportation gets scheduled optimally, we save lots of fuel, people and goods move around quicker and cheaper, factories become infinitely more efficient, dramatic advances in medicine, because suddenly we can, we cure cancer. I don't think we can cure cancer, but we can certainly we can certainly do much quicker experiments. Perfect computer vision, computer language recognition. So you see the problem, it wasn't very important in 1971, but better predictions of weather and of earthquakes, huge advances in modern mathematics, because solving a mathematical problem is a great example of something that's in NP. I work on a problem, I can't do it. There's lots of axioms, I don't know I don't know how to apply them or what order to apply them in. But if somebody comes along and hands me a proof of this, if someone says, I can prove the thing, I can sort out the thing you're working on, here's the question you're working on, here's a proof of it, I can read the proof really quickly. I can check that that's a mathematical proof. That's kind of part of my training. So I can check the answer quickly, and so if P equals MP, I can solve the problem quickly, so we can just get computers to do lots and lots of modern mathematics. It also means, of course, that there's no such thing as encryption anymore, so the government can read all your emails, even if you encrypt them, and internet security is now broken. You can't type your credit card into the internet, so online banks instantly, everything gets stopped. So society really changes. The internet stops working, but maybe we can cure cancer. But the world would be a very different place. Unfortunately, or possibly fortunately, most computer scientists believe that P is not equal to MP. They believe that there are problems out there which are easy to check but hard to solve. Easy to check the solutions but hard to solve. So what would happen if we proved that P was not equal to MP? Then we know, these guaranteed, we have algorithms which we now guaranteed can't be solved quickly. Now we definitely know we can talk in code. So I know that the government can't spy on me. That's really good. And terrorists also know that the government can't spy on them. And all the people that are currently selling illegal drugs and weapons on the dark internet, and that really is happening, they can sit comfortably knowing full well that they can definitely not be traced. So again, the world changes a little bit, and this is currently the working model, right? Theresa May was very, very upset about this. There was an iPhone story. You remember this? Some guy, there was incriminating evidence on his iPhone, but they couldn't unlock it, and Apple said they weren't going to unlock it, and the problem resolved itself, but that's the tip of the iceberg. More will happen again. There will be police officers that know full well that there's an encrypted drive that if they could decrypt, then this guy is nailed, but they can't decrypt it. If P isn't MP, we can design codes that are going to be impossible to break. So it should be clear that it's clearly important to work out if P is MP or not, right? So all the problems in P are in MP, but the question is, are there problems in MP but not in P? Where am I up to? I thought I'd finished. If you tell me the solution to a problem in class P, I've said all this already. So no, this is the point. Sorry, I'm going to tell you the point. How is a mathematician, so P probably isn't equal to MP, so how's a mathematician going to prove that? Right, and this is the point. All they have to do is they have to find something in that question mark. They have to find a problem which is in NP. We can check the answer quickly, but they have to prove that this problem cannot be solved quickly. That's what the problem is. And we're not yet at the stage where we have the theoretical tools to do that. This is the issue. We have to prove that you can't do something. And we could only prove you could do things in the 70s, so when are we going to be able to prove that you can't do things, right? So here's the time frame now. It's the third example of doing things and not doing things. Nash, formulated the question, gave easy examples of problems that could be solved quickly. Cook formalizes the mathematics, raises the question explicitly, and then we don't know what happens, right? Somebody at some point probably will find an example of a problem where they can check answers quickly, but they can prove that you cannot solve it quickly. But we are not yet there. It took 2,000 years for the Euclid one. How long will this take? So many modern mathematical techniques have been tried. All have failed. So it's some technical thing. There was a promising approach developed initially in 2001 and then really prominently in 2011 using geometric complexity theory. And again, it follows exactly the same pattern as the other things. This used modern algebraic geometry, which was only invented in the 1960s, and modern representation theory. So using these very, very modern techniques that weren't around for people like Cook and Nash, geometric complexity theory was an attempt to resolve this question. But the big breakthrough in April last year was a team of people proved that actually the path that we were following using geometric complexity theory to prove that P was not equal to MP, they proved that it would not work. So you see, mathematicians are good at proving that things don't happen, but in this case, it wasn't proving that P wasn't MP. It was proving that our idea is even sort of meta, right? The strategy of proof cannot succeed. So there you go. So that's the end of the talk. How do we prove the computers can't solve a problem quickly? Currently, we don't know the answer. But, So thank you.